When I turned onto our street, the crimson hues of dusk cloaked the sky, a picturesque scene undone by the piercing scent that hit me the moment I rolled down my car window. It was sharp and invasive, the unmistakable stench of gasoline. My heart thudded with a mix of curiosity and dread as I pulled into the driveway. I killed the engine and sat for a moment, the scent growing stronger. It seemed to seep into the car, filling every crevice with its ominous aroma. I got out, my senses heightened, and followed the smell to the garage. The door was ajar, which was unusual. Minnie always kept it sealed, citing security. Pushing the door open, the scene before me halted everything. There was Minnie, my wife of 10 years, standing beside a mountain of jerry cans. Next to her was a man I'd never seen before. His eyes were wide, frantic, darting between me and Minnie. In her hand, a lighter flickered to life, its small flame dancing menacingly in the dim light of the garage. I froze, my voice escaping in a hoarse whisper. "Minnie? What's going on here?" Her reaction was almost comical if it weren't so chilling. She fumbled with the lighter, her fingers trembling as she tried to extinguish it. The man next to her shifted uncomfortably, his gaze locked on the ground. "It's not what it looks like, Tom," she stammered, a poor attempt at innocence. I took a step closer, my mind racing. "It looks like you're planning to burn down our house with me in it." She shook her head frantically, her usual composure shattered into frantic shards. "No, I was just cleaning up with gasoline and a lighter?" I interrupted, my voice laced with incredulity and rising anger. The strange man finally spoke, his voice raspy. "We didn't know you'd be home today." Minnie's eyes widened at his words, her face flushing a deep red. "Shut up, Marco," she hissed at him, panic evident in her tone. Marco, that was his name. I studied him, the nervous energy, the wild look in his eyes. This was a man on the edge, and my wife had brought him into our home, into our lives. "Why, Minnie?" My question was a plea for a sliver of truth. Her mouth opened and closed, words failing her. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of her deceit, she whispered, "I needed a way out, Tom. I didn't mean for it to end like this." "A way out?" I echoed, my voice hollow. "By staging my death?" She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes, but I found no sympathy in my heart. "It was supposed to look like an accident. I never wanted to hurt you." But she had. The betrayal stung, a visceral pain that seemed to gnaw at my insides. I looked around at the life we had built, tainted now by her actions. "You won't have to see me again," I said coldly, my decision cementing itself with every thudding beat of my heart. Her sob broke the tense silence, but it was too late for regrets. I turned away from the wreckage of our marriage, the smell of gasoline a bitter reminder of the fire she'd almost lit, not just in our garage, but in my life. As I walked away, the gravity of her betrayal fully sank in. I was shocked, yes, but the clarity that came with it was unmistakable. I would ruin her, legally, socially. She would regret the day she thought she could dispose of me like a pawn in her twisted game. The wheels of revenge began to turn as I dialed my lawyer's number. The road ahead was clear, albeit fraught with the debris of our shattered union. I wouldn't just divorce her, I would expose her madness to the world. This was just the beginning. The morning after discovering Minnie's betrayal, the air in our home was thick, charged with a silent tension that seemed to suffocate any remnants of our life together. I'd spent the night in a hotel, the images of jerry cans and that flickering lighter haunting my dreams. I returned home only to collect some essentials and to face Minnie one more time, under the watchful eye of daylight. She was sitting in the kitchen when I walked in, her posture defeated, eyes red from crying. The sight did little to soften the resolve firming up inside me. "I've spoken to my lawyer," I began without preamble, my voice steady despite the turmoil swirling within. "I'm filing for divorce, and I'll be pressing charges for attempted murder." Minnie's head snapped up, her eyes widening. "Tom, please, you can't believe I would actually go through with it." "I saw enough," I replied flatly. The kettle on the stove began to whistle, its shrill tone slicing through the heavy air between us. I ignored it, focusing on the matter at hand. Marco was there too, sitting awkwardly on a stool by the counter, a bandaged hand wrapped around a mug of coffee. His presence was a stark reminder of the depth of her deceit. I pointed at Marco, are you even aware of the gravity of what you were part of? He shifted uneasily, avoiding my gaze. I was just helping out. I didn't know she wanted to burn me alive? I finished for him sharply. Ignorance isn't a defense. You'll be hearing from the police. Minnie stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Tom. I just felt trapped, like I had no other way out. Trapped? By what? Our marriage? I scoffed, anger flaring. You had options, Minnie. You could have asked for a divorce. But you chose this madness. She took a step toward me, her hands outstretched as if to bridge the distance her betrayal had created. I know it was wrong, but I was desperate. Marco, he has a way of convincing people to do crazy things. Marco looked away, his silence an implicit admission of guilt. I grabbed my bag, slinging it over my shoulder. I trusted you, Minnie. And you plotted to kill me. There's nothing you can say to justify that. Turning to leave, I felt her gaze on my back, heavy with words left unspoken. But there was nothing left to discuss. The legal gears were already in motion, and my focus was clear: retribution, not reconciliation. As I stepped outside, the fresh air felt like a cleansing breath. I dialed the police to report the incident, my voice firm. The operator's assurance that officers would visit soon was a cold comfort, but necessary. Next, I called a press contact I knew from my work, ready to shed light on Minnie's actions. The story of a wife's attempt to stage her husband's death was sensational, sure to catch fire. This exposure was part of my revenge, a public shaming to match the private betrayal. By the time I drove away, the police cars were turning into our street. Looking in the rearview mirror, I saw Minnie on the doorstep, her figure small and forlorn against the sprawling house. The image was a stark contrast to the fiery death she had planned for me. As I headed towards the city, my phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer, meeting set for tomorrow. All in motion. The road ahead was fraught with legal battles and public scandal, but I was ready. After all, she had lit the match, I was merely stoking the flames. The cityscape passed in a blur as I drove to the office of my attorney, James Carter, a man known for his ruthlessness in the courtroom. I needed that kind of ferocity now, more than ever. My phone rang incessantly, buzzing with calls from friends who'd heard about my situation through the grapevine, and reporters who caught wind of the scandal. I ignored them all, my focus narrowing on the impending legal battle. James greeted me with a firm handshake, his office stark and imposing. Tom, I've reviewed the initial details you sent over. This is quite a situation, but we'll handle it, he assured me, ushering me into his office. We sat across from each other, the sunlight casting long shadows across the room. I want to go full throttle, James. Charges, divorce, and maximum exposure. I want her to feel the weight of what she tried to do, I said, my voice a mix of anger and resolve. James nodded, tapping his pen against the notepad in front of him. The attempted murder charge will be our strongest suit. It's direct and has substantial evidence with your testimony and the physical setup you walked into. As for the divorce, that's straightforward given the circumstances. What about the public aspect? I've already started that ball rolling with a press contact, I added. That's good. It keeps the pressure on her and sways public opinion. It could also make her more amenable to a settlement in the divorce. Fewer delays, James explained. We were interrupted by a knock on the door. James's assistant peeked in. Detective Marnie Losh is here to see you, Tom. Send her in, James responded. Detective Losh entered, a woman in her 40s with a sharp gaze that seemed to take in every detail. Mr. Davis, she began, extending her hand. I'm leading the investigation into your case. I need to get your full statement and any additional information you can provide about the man involved. Marco, was it? Yes, Marco Simmons. He's a gym trainer, met my wife about 6 months ago, I explained as she took notes. Thank you. We're also going to need to search your house for any additional evidence. If you could facilitate access today, it would be helpful, Detective Losh said. Absolutely, I replied. I want this resolved as quickly as possible. She nodded, her demeanor professional yet empathetic. We'll do our best. This is a serious charge, and we treat it as such. I'll keep you updated on our progress. After she left, James laid out the next steps. I'll draft the divorce papers today. We'll file by tomorrow. And Tom, brace yourself. This is going to get messier before it gets better. I nodded, steeling myself. I'm ready for it. Leaving James's office, I felt a mix of trepidation and a strange relief. The wheels were in motion, the truth was out. As I stepped outside, a group of reporters rushed towards me, their cameras flashing. Mr. Davis! Can you tell us what happened? Is it true your wife tried to kill you? I paused, facing the sea of microphones. Yes, it's true. And now, justice will take its course. Their questions followed me as I walked to my car, each step feeling like a move in a chess game I had no choice but to win. As the court date loomed, the city's buzz about my case grew louder, the story of betrayal and attempted murder weaving through every news channel and social media feed. I kept my public appearances to a minimum, only speaking through my attorney, James, or directly to the press when absolutely necessary. The strategy was to maintain a controlled narrative, one that painted me solely as the victim, which I was, but now with an edge of calculated vengeance. The morning of the hearing was crisp, the air biting as I walked up the steps of the courthouse. Cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, trying to capture any flicker of emotion. I kept my face impassive, my resolve like armor. Inside, the courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Minnie sat with her attorney, her eyes downcast, avoiding the accusatory stares from the gallery. Marco was there too, his face pale, a stark contrast to his usual bronzed gym-honed appearance. As the proceedings began, James laid out the case with precision, detailing the evidence of the gasoline, the jerry cans, the lighter, and Marco's presence. He painted a picture of a premeditated plot so sinister that murmurs of disbelief rippled through the courtroom. When it was Minnie's turn, her defense spun a tale of misunderstanding and emotional distress, suggesting her actions were the result of a mental breakdown rather than malicious intent. Marco supported her story, claiming undue influence over his actions, his voice trembling. I listened, my face a mask of stoicism, but inside, the coil of betrayal tightened. When called to the stand, I recounted the night, my voice steady, the horror I felt as palpable in the courtroom as it had been in the garage. The jury's deliberation took hours, but to me it felt like seconds. When they returned, the verdict was swift, guilty. Minnie's face crumbled, and for a moment, a part of me felt a pang of old affection, quickly smothered by the remembrance of her treachery. The judge sentenced Minnie and Marco to significant time, justice served in the eyes of the law, but not yet in mine. Outside the courthouse, the reporters swarmed, hungry for my reaction. Justice has been served, I announced, the set of my jaw firm. And let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks they can plot murder and not face the consequences. But my plan wasn't finished. Over the next weeks, I used my influence and the public sympathy to freeze Minnie's assets, her financial avenues choked as thoroughly as my trust had been. I pushed for a quick divorce, uncontested due to her incarceration, and it was granted. The final act of my revenge was the most ruthless. Through a series of calculated leaks and anonymous tips, I ensured that every secret Minnie had kept, every lie she had woven into the fabric of her life, was exposed. Her reputation, already in tatters from the trial, disintegrated. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of glory over the city, I stood over a bridge, watching the water flow beneath. My phone buzzed, it was James confirming that the last of the assets had been liquidated, the proceeds going to various charities. Nothing was left for Minnie, only the cold walls of her prison cell. As I turned off the phone, a final message came through, an unknown number. "Are you satisfied now?" it read. I stared at the message, then typed a simple response before blocking the number. "Yes." I tossed the phone into the river, watching it disappear into the water. The ripples spread wide, distorting and eventually disappearing, much like my past life. I turned away, a free man, the chains of betrayal finally broken, my revenge complete. The darkness of the night seemed less oppressive as I walked away, the city's lights a backdrop to a new stage in my life, one without Minnie, without betrayal, a stage where I could start anew, ruthless lessons learned and bitterly applied.